of the great rabbis of yesteryear. Now, it happens to be here on Yud Gimel Tevet. It's chronicled over that it's marked the Hilula here, just from the Hayimi website, of famous chief rabbi in Italy of Padua. His name was Rabbi Mordechai Ghirondi, Zecher Tzadik Nebracha, famous rabbi of his time. He was actually reported over born in October 1799, and he passed away in January the 4th, 1852. He would have been about 53 years of age. Approximately, he was an Italian Jewish author, and he'd go on to become a chief rabbi of the area of Padua, a very prominent position, we must point out, at that point in time. Naturally, Padua, when he passed away, was part of the Kingdom of Lombardy, of Venetia, Austrian Empire, respectively, over there. Let's explore a few of the highlights of the famous rabbi's life. Now, he was born into a rabbinic family in Padua. Now, I believe we've spoken about the Girondi family, I think, on a few occasions here before. And we actually did record a video within regards to the famous Padua rabbinic seminaries, I think there was at that point in time. And we did speak about the Italian Jewish community also on various occasions at the time. But he's featured very much in various different encyclopedias. And something of let's just talk about the background towards his family. I think the founder of the family, of the Girondi family, was someone named Benzion Girondi, or also in parenthesis you could say Sarfati. He was a founder of the family who lived in the 16th and 17th century, and he was author of a work entitled the Kitzur Hilchot Shechita Ubdika, which happens to have been, let's say, a compendium of the laws of Shechita, slaughtering of animals. I'm not sure if this book, this Torah work, was published in of itself, but very, very famous. Now, another one from this great family in of itself was some of them. I'm not sure how they were all connected together, but I think it was one big family. Benzion Aryeh Ghirondi, Ben Mordechai. He was a grandson, I believe, of Benzion Ghirondi, Sarfati. Naturally, he was born, I think, in the Cittadella, which happened to have been a village near Padua. And I think maybe he was born in the year 1763. He passed away, I think, on December the 21st, 1815. He was the author of a volume containing, let's say, homilies, poems, various notes, exegetical notes on the Torah, respectively. Once again, not too sure if it was published or not. Rabbi Mordechai Shmuel Benzion Ghirondi, who is speaking about over here today. There's a lot that we're going to talk about. Also, there was other famous people, including Shlomo Eliezer Benzion Ghirondi, who was a famous Talmudic scholar and a scribe of the 17th century. I think he left over a responsa, which is published in Rabbi Shmuel Abuab's Devar Shmuel, if I'm not mistaken. He would also leave a work of the name, the Ma'aseh Nisim, which is a history of the important events in Judaism that occurred in his time. So I think this is some of the notable, let's just say, personalities inside this family in itself. I think it was an Italian family of Padua, I think, which would settle there towards the end of the 16th century. And the name indicates that, let's say, this family itself came from Gerona, I think, in Spain, potentially, over here. And why called Sarfati? Possibly because of the French connection, maybe because Gerona is near the border of France, or because, let's just say, this family itself had some time lived in that country. And we just listed 4 or 5 prominent members of the Girondi family. But over here, we're speaking about Rabbi Mordechai Shmuel Ghirondi. Anyone tuning in live at the moment, please subscribe to the channel. We've got fantastic content here as we're exploring the history of a really famous Italian rabbi who was a chief rabbi in Padua over here in this special edition. So if you're new here, please welcome to our community and please subscribe. Okay, so he was born into a rabbinic family in Padua. He would study in the famous rabbinical college in Padua, where I think he would be later appointed a professor of theology. This is back in the year 1824. So he would have been about, at that stage in time, about 25 years of age. Now, come what the year 1829, when he was bridging onto 30, he was appointed an assistant rabbi of Padua. And I think 2 years later, he would become the chief rabbi of there. Remember, to be a chief rabbi at such a young age, about 32 years of age, 31 years of age, absolutely astounding. And he was recognized, let's say he was a recognized authority in the rabbinate and was consulted by rabbis of various different communities at that stage in time. Now, he was a bibliophile, let's just say, in of itself. had like a grandiose, let's say, book collection, and now I think it's part of the Montefiore Library in Jewish College in London, and the Jewish Theological Seminary, I think, in New York. Also, some of his publications over there, which is very, very interesting. Among his publications includes the Tokho Ratzuf Abba. Now, we're going to explore some of the highlights of his books in due course. Now, what was this book? It was a work on ethics, which was produced when he was only 16 years of age, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was printed actually in Paisa in the year 1818. Another work of his was the Ma'amar Kiryat Haborot. This was a treatise, let's say, on artesian wells, showing reference to them, I think, within regards to the Gemara, respectively. I think printed, I think, in Esragio's Igorot Yosher, now, who was here, that was in Vienna in 1834. I think Rabbi Isaac Samuel Reggio, let's just speak about him for a minute over here. He was also a famous Italian rabbi, if I'm not mistaken, an Austro-Italian scholar. And he was born and died in an area called Gorizia. I think we did speak a video about him, if I'm not mistaken, maybe some months back. It's an area that's bordering Slovenia over there. He would actually study Rabbi Reggio with Hebrew and Rabbinic, let's just say, under his father, Rabbi Abraham Vita, if I'm not mistaken, who was a later rabbi of Gorizia, respectively. And I think Rabbi Reggio's father one of the, let's say, was more on the liberal spectrum, and I think had connections with various other rabbis at that point in time that were definitely more Hebraists and educationalist spectrum in itself, including Rabbi Naphtali Hertz Wesley, if I'm not mistaken, who was maybe seen more towards the Haskalah section, you could say, it was a spectrum of the rabbinates in of itself. It's actually interesting about Rabbi Isaac Samuel Reggio. At the age of 14, he would write a metrical diaria on the passing of the rabbi of Gorizia, someone named Rabbi Moshe Hefetz, if I'm not mistaken. And what's interesting, he would be a rabbi that would know various languages, including French, German, Latin, also Italian, and would study several Semitic languages in addition to Hebrew, if I'm not mistaken. So that is very, very interesting. He actually lived in Trieste. I think he would move there in the year 1803. And he was quite close to Rabbi Mordechai Isaac de Colonga. I think he himself passed away in the year 1824. He would go back and forth to areas of Gorizia, if I'm not mistaken. And I think he would definitely be more bridging towards the Haskalah spectrum. He would study Kabbalah also, and let's just say he would, it's actually reported here in Wikipedia, but more he would study it, the greater he grew, let's say, his aversion to its mystical and allegedly, let's say, doctrines. Maybe he maybe saw it as illogical. I'm not sure. That's sort of chronicled over here on Wikipedia, and yeah, very, very interesting. He would write various different works, also by Samuel Wood, I think, including a metrical Italian translation of the book of Isaiah, on Lamentations, on Pirkei Avot, if I'm not mistaken, and so on and so forth. But we're going on a bit of a tangent. He was more of a philosopher also, we have to point out. Rabbi Isaac Samuel Reggio was. Okay, be it as it may, we're speaking here about Rabbi Mordechai Ghirondi. And yeah, very, very interesting. Now, I think among his important works, let's just say, in of itself, included, let's say, the Toledot Gedolei Yisrael, which is let's say, biographical and a bibliographical dictionary of Italian rabbis and secular studies. Remember, he passed away in 1852, so we're talking about pre-1850 probably in of itself. Now, he had in possession, apparently reported over, Graziadioni Nepi's biographical work, which is actually named the Zecher Tzadikim. Now, let's speak about Graziandi. Who was he exactly? He was a Kabbalist, he was a rabbi, Rabbi Nepi was, and a physician. He, I think, studied in Ferrara, if I'm not mistaken, for 12 years, under Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Ayash, who was another famous rabbi there, and would teach many disciples, I think, in his native city. And I think he was sent as deputy to the Assembly of Jewish Notables, which convened, actually, reportedly, but enough, by Napoleon I Paris. This was back in the year 1806, and I think later on he was called this Congregation of Cento, where I think at that point in time he would hold a rabbinate position until he passed away. He had a pupil, as we mentioned before, Rabbi Isaac Ruggiero, who became his successor at Ferrara, respectively. Rabbi Nepi, I think, lived an ascetic life. He was one of the highest religious authorities of his time in Italy. He would have various publications, including the Leviathan, which is a collection of responsa, which he sent to different rabbis. Also, Drushim, which is a collection of his sermons, and the Zecher Letzadikim, if I'm not mistaken, which was, very consisting of biographical and bibliographical sketches of rabbis and Jewish scholars, which was, let's say, intended to complete the book of Rabbi Azra, Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azra, famous Rabbi of Shem HaGedolim, but left unfinished, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was eventually printed by Rabbi Mordechai Ghirondi, who we're speaking about today, under the title Toldot Gedolei Yisrael, and was published by his son, I think, in Trieste in the year 1853. Actually, interesting enough, I think a catalogue of his library was published in Lemberg in the year 1873. So it's actually interesting. Rabbi Nepi passed away in the year 1836 on the 18th of January of that specific year, which is actually close to the time period, you could say, you could argue, of our Hilula here today, which is very, very interesting because we happen to be in the month of Tevet. I think there happened to be actually in a couple of weeks' time, Hebrew date-wise, he passed away, Rabbi Nepi did, on the 28th of Tevet, if I am not mistaken, but that's definitely a video to record. Hopefully we're going to maybe say some words about him nearer the time of his Hilula, which will be at the time of recording here, about just over 2 weeks away. Okay, so let's go back to Rabbi Mordechai Ghirondi over here. Also, I think, I think he would add 831 numbers of his own to this bibliographical work of the Zecher Letzadikim, 2/3 of which I think are not found in any earlier biographical dictionary. And they would combine together and publish. It was published by someone named Ephraim Raphael Ghirondi, who was the author's son. And Rabbi Nepi and Rabbi Ghirondi were, they're printed on opposite pages. This was printed, obviously, in the 1853, a year after, I believe, he passed away. And I think the latter would also write the Kavutzat Kesef, which is a responsa, once again in 2 parts, and Luketei Shoshanim, I think, which was a novel, which was in 2 volumes, I think, which was both left unpublished. It was letters of Rabbi Ghirondi's on different subjects, which were published in the Kerem Hemed, if I'm not mistaken. Also, so that is very, very interesting. There's many, many references to him in various different places, which I very much recommend everyone to actually look into. But we're speaking to Rabbi Mordechai Ghirondi here on this specific edition today, and much can be said about him. I think, the Kerem HaChesed was written, I think it was a Hebrew writing, if I'm not mistaken, just to speak about it here for a minute. And many of the Chachmei Yisrael, let's just say, would have a part in it, we have to point out. And I think it was connected to Rabbi Shmuel Leib Goldenberg, if I'm not mistaken, and various contributions would actually be contributed, including Rabbi Shlomo Yehuda Rappaport, if I'm not mistaken, was a chief rabbi of Trnopol, and I think maybe in Prague at one stage in time. And there was literacy works, including from Yitzhak Adler, who was, you could say, definitely more on the Haskalah side of the spectrum. Also, Rabbi Meir Halevi Latris, who was also a member of the Haskalah movement. Shimshon Bloch, also part of the Enlightenment. You can see various. Rabbi Yehuda Leib Mises, who was an author. Maybe also part. Many of the, let's just say, rabbis that were part of the Haskalah movement would actually contribute very much to this publication in of itself. That's something I would point out. Now, remember, we're an Orthodox Jewish channel over here, but at the same time, we are a historic channel where we are exploring the history of Jewish history, and this was important for many of those rabbis at that point in time. There were many bibliographers, I think, also that would actually take part within regards to this, which I have to point out, I think, including Rabbi Zechariah Frankel, if I'm not mistaken, who actually is considered the spiritual father of conservative Judaism. He actually learned in the rabbinical seminary in Breslau, if I'm not mistaken, and really did very much scientific research. Another rabbi, you could say, was part of this was Rabbi Yeshua Heschel Shaw, who was a writer and let's say a scholar and the founder of magazine, if I'm not mistaken, over there at that point in time. And Rabbi Aaron Jelinek, if I'm not mistaken, was a Moravian Jewish scholar and would edit various publications, if I'm not mistaken. Rabbi Adam Cohen, if I'm not mistaken, was a poet. And he was also part of the Enlightenment movement. And Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Ben Yaakov, a Lithuanian Jewish bibliographer, if I'm not mistaken, and was involved in publishing at that point in time. So we're just speaking about the Keren, the book, the Kerem Chemed, in of itself, respectively, over there, which is very, very interesting. And we're exploring the life of Rabbi Mordechai Ghirondi, who was a famous rabbi of his time and a chief rabbi of Padua for a specific period of time. So, so I think he was close also to another rabbi, Rabbi Hananel Raphael Hai Nefi. So that's what we mentioned about before, who was Rabbi Nifi. But let's speak about him for a minute. He had a close relationship, I think, with him. He was actually born in Pereira and passed away in the Papal States in Cento, if I'm not mistaken, in the year 1836, which is part of Italy. I think he was a physician, also a rabbi, and a Kabbalist. If I'm not mistaken, he would study in Ferrara for 12 years under Rabbi Yaakov Ayash, we have to point out over there. And he had great Talmudic learning, let's say, and he was sent as deputy to the Assembly of Jewish Notables, convened by Napoleon I at Paris, if I'm not mistaken. And I think his Talmud was Rabbi Isaac Reggio, who we spoke about before. He lived an ascetic life and was one of the highest religious authorities, let's just say, of his time, as we mentioned about before, just a few minutes ago. So that's very, very interesting, friends, over here. Okay, friends, anyone tuning in at the moment live, please subscribe to our channel. We're a community here where we are learning about famous rabbis yesteryear, and we happen to be speaking about Rabbi Mordechai Ghirondi, who was a famous rabbi of his time. So there's a gallery of his books, as I said before, I think, which is available in those specific places that we spoke about before, which is interesting. And there's a lot written about him in various different websites and encyclopedias, which I recommend everyone to look at. We're going to explore a few more highlights within regards to him in a minute. We're speaking Rabbi Mordechai Ghirondi, happens to be a Hilula. He was a chief rabbi of Padua for a significant point of time. Just watch space. We're taking a short break. So in the meantime, please subscribe to the channel. I'll be back in 2 minutes, friends, over here. Hi, shalom, everyone. Thanks for being patient, everyone that was waiting. We're speaking about a famous rabbi of his time, Rabbi Mordechai Ghirondi. Very, very famous rabbi. He was a chief rabbi in Padua at one window of time. I recommend everyone to watch over. I think we did record various videos of great rabbis that actually happen to have hailed from Italy at various occasions in time. And that's something that I would definitely want to point out over here. So that's very, very interesting. Here on this special edition. So welcome everyone if you're new to the channel at the moment, and please don't forget to subscribe to our community as we're exploring the history of great rabbi who was a chief rabbi in Padua. And I would recommend everyone to watch over the previous videos we've actually recorded. Friends, actually, just on a side note, we have recorded over already 1,400 biographical videos of great rabbis that were from yesteryear, from various different countries, especially the Oriental countries, and so on and so forth. So I'd strongly recommend everyone to look back on those old videos that we've done. And you'll see we probably recorded about 40, 50 Italian rabbis already, with absolutely staggering amounts over here. And I very, very much recommend everyone to look over back on that and to share. Also, don't forget to share all these videos to your friends and so on and so forth, as we try and really get a breadth of the entire world Jewry in of itself. We are speaking about Rabbi Mordechai Ghirondi. We're going to explore a few more highlights of his life in the next minute or so. We're going to progress with that. So everyone, welcome, and we're about to be in Shabbat Parashat Vayechi this week. So very, very exciting time in of itself. Okay, so as we said before, he was born in 1799. He passed away in 1852. Now, we have to point out his father's name was Rabbi Ben Sion Aryeh Girondi, if I'm not mistaken. So obviously, being from Padua, we have to point out he would learn under his father while he was young, under his auspices. His father was also a Moritz Tzedek and the head of Jewish court in Padua, and very, very, let's say, very prominent position. Who happened to have passed away in the year 1824. So you can see the caliber of the rabbis were very, very famous at that point in time. And these are rabbis who've very much spoken about on various occasions over here before inside this series. So you can see Padua, Italy, was more of a bastion place of Torah learning in of its time. And you can see there was really a lot of high learning. There was different Torah learning centers over there. And the Pinizzi family in of itself was, if you go in the National Library of Israel, the website itself, they've got many of Rabbi Pinizzi's various different collections of Torah books in of itself over there, which I recommend everyone to look at. There are numerous ones also. Okay, so that's very, very interesting. Let's just go back to the rabbi we're speaking about over here. Rabbi Mordechai Ghirondi, I think, would get married to the daughter of a famous doctor, Rabbi Raphael Luzzato, which was very, very interesting. Remember, we've spoken about Luzzato family on various occasions in this series already. And, there were... Rabbi Raphael Luzzato was definitely... he was a physician at that point in time. I think we did record a video exclusively within regards to the family itself. So I recommend everyone to look at that. So there was definitely a connection between them. I think they were all related together. So maybe there was maybe possibly, I would suggest, there was some connection to the Ram Chal. I think they would have. Very interesting. I think in 1817, his first book called the Tochot Ratzuf Ahava, if I'm not mistaken, which is a book on Musar, and Derech Eretz, was printed in Pisa. So in 1817, that stage in time, he was only about 18 years of age when it was printed, possibly even younger. In 1829, as we mentioned before, he would start working as the head of the Bet Din, and which is a very prominent position in the city of Padua. And after the rabbi of the city had passed away, I think Chacham Lishma Meir Paduvoni, Padua, if I'm not mistaken, and that was a very prominent position at that point in time with a lot of responsibilities. Remember, we spoke that Italy in those days was definitely one of the main centers of Torah all across the world, and this would bring out huge responsibility in of itself, but very, very prominent at the same time. Now, Rabbi Mordechai Ghirondi, שמות חכמי ישראל ותולדותם, שנעלמו מעיני כל חי כדי להוציאם בחשיכה לאורה, להקים שם המת על מלאכתו ולתת נחת רוח לנשמתו. He was a historian who really explore, explore within regards to the past over there. And I think he passed away, if I'm not mistaken. החכם מרדכי שמואל גירונדי נפטר בפתאומיות ביום י"ג טבת in the year 1852. Tough Resh Yud Bet, if I'm not mistaken. Now, his book called The Toldot Gudlei Yisrael, גירוני Italy, came out after he passed away, if I'm not mistaken, through his son in the year 1853. And that was in Tristat, respectively. His book, The Mordechai, which was the Chidushim and the Pardes, let's just say, came out way later in 1999, if I'm not mistaken. And various other works, including Yad Mordechai, Likutei Shoshanim, Kvutzat Kesef, נשתמרו בדפוס ישן בכתב יהודי בספרדי, המכונה כתב רש"י. חידושים נוספים בתשובותיו, עמודים בכתב יד, עמוד סנאי מניסקריפט פורם, כן נמצא ספר שולחן ערוך, שהיה ברשותו, וברשותיו פסקי הלכות בכתב יד, if I'm not mistaken. Now, in a few minutes, we are going to explore a few of the highlights of his book, which I would recommend everyone to actually look at over here. We happen to be speaking about a chief rabbi of Padua in his point in time, which is very interesting, and that very much was famous rabbis of yesteryear over there, including not just also Rabbi Ghirondi, which we have to point out. And hopefully at one stage in time we will actually record a video of the history of Italian Jewry, hopefully. So that's something that will be very exciting actually to do. So he actually learned, I think, also in the Rabbinical College of Padua, we have to point out. Rabbi Ghirondi did when he was in his younger ages. So I'm not too sure who else was studying there, but I'm sure that would have brought a lot of responsibility and growth also at the same time. So something that we have to point out. Very similar. I think some of his works, if I'm not mistaken, might have been sold also in Sotheby's, if I'm not mistaken. I think one in Toldot Gudlei Yisrael, from him, I think, is estimated to worth as much as $30,000, if I'm not mistaken, in a auction at one stage in time. I'm not sure which specific year it was, but yeah, that would be absolutely astounding, just to point out over here on this special edition. But there's a lot actually on him, a lot of breadth of information on the internet, and I recommend everyone to just look into that. And just like to learn more about him also. So yeah, very interesting. So let's explore a bit more with regards to him. Once again, Padua had a great Jewish community over there, and just checking something at the moment. So it's yeah, so it's very interesting. Key figures, I think, inside there. In Padua itself include Rabbi Houdin, who would lead the community through challenging times. If I'm not mistaken, there was important figures like Rabbi Reggio, Rabbi Eugenio Cohen Sacerdoti, I think, even if I'm not mistaken, at one time, and you can see there was many other rabbis also. So hopefully, when we do record this video on the history of the Jewish community over there, we will point out everything more in their depth. If I'm and remember, there were key institutions also in Padua, including the University of Padua, which was an inclusive institution that would allow Jewish students and scholars, fostering intellectual growth. We have to point out very significant events would take place over there, including the Napoleonic era of 1805 to 1814. And in 1866, there was a full emancipation granted with Padua's annexation to the Kingdom of Italy. If I'm not mistaken, that's something else that we can point out within regards to him over here. But we, as we said before, we're speaking about a specific rabbi here inside this video, and really trying to get the breadth of his history, respectively, over here. So that's very interesting. So we're speaking of Rabbi Mordechai Ghirondi. Let's explore a bit more within regards to him. Let's explore a few of the highlights of his books over here, of his book. I think Perek Rishon on page number 6 actually features. I think it was printed in Pisa, as I said before, I think in the year 1818. So very much going to the theme of which many other rabbis would actually have within regards to Avtat, Recha, Kamocha, and unity, let's just say. Another teaching that he would give over, I think from the first parak, on the page number 5, if I'm not mistaken, is Melamed Haderech La'avat Kol Adam Hen Anei Hen Ashir, if I'm not mistaken. Another teaching will be in Perak Sheni in page number 7, Amud Bet. Melamed Isu Lismoch B'Mpalat Oivo Shugorem Katorog Shamayim. So that's another teaching. Then another teaching states over Melamed Hadrush LeRabim Umare Nevochim. Kulam Yikru Banav Maaseh Yadav. This, I think, featured in page number 10, if I'm not mistaken, on Amud Bet of this grandiose book. Melamed Chachmat Savto. This comes from Amud 56, if I'm not mistaken. And once again, part of the book, many of the geniuses of Italy. One last teaching. This is actually from page number 14 on the 7th parak of Tukva Rodsof Ava, if I'm not mistaken, over there. Once again, it was printed in the year 1818, we have to point out over here. So you can see he was very, very well decorated, very famous rabbi of his time, and was definitely a prominent position. And much of his works, I think, actually featured in the National Library of Israel over there. So that's something else to point out of your friends. Now, anyone tuning in live at the moment, we are exploring the history of famous Chief Rabbi of Padua. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and join our community over here, because we really are a community like no other, and we do really great content here on this channel over here, just for you fantastic people out there to benefit, to enjoy, to educate, and to learn more. So we explored some highlights within regards to him. There's many PDFs out there that will actually speak about this specific grandiose position, let's just say, to be Chief Rabbi of Italy. Various different intellectuals and so on and so forth would have the premiership over there respectively. So we're speaking about Rabbi Ghirondi over here in this special edition. And it is actually quite late from here, from the time of recording, nearly 1 o'clock here in Israel. So I'm going to cut it short, I think, in the next couple of minutes. It will actually be good to have a chief rabbi, a list of the chief rabbis of Padua. I don't know if it's actually accessible in of itself. So I think someone named Rabbi Meir ben Isaac Katznelbogen, Maharam of Padua, apparently was very famous. I think in the 16th century, also Rabbi, as I mentioned before, I think 19th century Rabbi Mordechai Ghirondi would be famous. And these were the key figures, let's just say, in of itself. I think other chief rabbis of Padua would include, if I'm not mistaken, Rabbi Judah ben Eliezer Halevi Mintz, who would serve as rabbi in Padua until he passed away in 1508. And Rabbi Abraham ben Judah Halevi Mintz, who would be the chief rabbi there as work as rabbi, and Meir Katzenelbogen was his son-in-law. Now, Rabbi Meir ben Isaac Katzenelbogen, who was also known as the Maharam of Padua, was a leading rabbinical authority who would succeed his father-in-law, Rabbi Abraham Mintz, as chief rabbi in 1525, and would serve there until he passed away in 1565. Rabbi Samuel Judah Katzenelbogen also, I think, would serve there until he passed away in 1597. Rabbi Isaac Chaim Kantarini, who was also known as a Pachat Yitzhak, was a rabbi and author in Padua in the later part of the 17th century. Obviously, another rabbi of this specific era was Rabbi Isaac Lampronti, who we've spoken about before. Once again, also the author of the Pachat Yitzhak. He was a physician and author. A first halachic encyclopedia he would actually write. Was another obviously we're speaking about Rabbi Mordechai Samuel Girondi. Then there was someone DD titled Yud Loli, who was Rabbi Yud Loli, who would later serve as a chief rabbi at Padua and a professor of Hebrew at the University of Padua. Also, last one, Rabbi Loki, the head rabbi of the Padua community as of 2021. Report, and was involved in the local Jewish museum and interfaith dialogue, I believe, over here. Very, very interesting enough. So he definitely was a very famous rabbi of his time. It was a prominent position to have, and always a pleasure to speak about great rabbis of yesteryear. So everyone, if you're new over here to our community, welcome. First of all, that's the first thing I would like to point out over here, as we are exploring the history of great rabbis here of yesteryear And yeah, really appreciate it. Anyone, if you're watching live, please join our community over here and be up to, let's just say, various different great educational networks and tools within regards to famous rabbinic yesteryear. I think we're going to call it a day here. It is quite late, so don't forget to write a comment, please, on the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and learn more. And wishing everyone a fantastic day and a meaningful Shabbat. So please, everyone, please have a Shabbat Shalom Brach. Take care and thanks for watching. Appreciate it.